Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. It's so good to see so many people interested in taking aim at good teaching. And the Taking Aim series, some of you may have joined us way back in March in the spring when campuses closed and folks had to learn very quickly how to teach online and remotely in various ways. And so we launched the Taking Aim series back then. When it became evident that COVID was going to continue to affect us into the fall semester, we started this new series. And this time, though, we're focusing on experts who have both done a lot of perhaps remote teaching online or have developed expertise in areas that can help us all manage in this time of crisis. So our moderator today is Dr. Melody Bethards, and I want to introduce Mel. She is from the Des Moines Area Community College, where she serves as the Health and Public Services Nurse and Nursing Simulation Coordinator. DMCC is in Central Iowa, and Melody coordinates not only the nursing experience for practical and associate degree nursing students, but also respiratory therapy and paramedics. She has a graduate certificate in simulation education. She's a CNE and a CHSE, and she's published in simulation-related journals, presented at many different regional, local, national conferences, and has received several awards. And this past spring, she served as a resource and consultant to the Iowa Board of Nursing and the Department of Education there regarding the use of virtual simulation learning experiences to replace clinical time. So please welcome Dr. Melody Bethards.
Well, thank you, Marianne, for that wonderful introduction. I will be your moderator for the day. I'm very excited to moderate this particular webinar, which is on developing psychomotor skills through mastery learning. As Marianne said, we're really looking at best practices, and we have a fabulous panel of experts with us today to share what they're doing related to psychomotor skills through mastery learning. Marianne and I will both be moderating the chat, and so as you're putting your questions into the question and answer section, we will be moderating those throughout the day. So we will write down themes, and then at the end of the webinar, our panel will provide about 20 minutes of time that we can post those questions for them to answer for you. So please put those questions in the question and answer button, and we will be watching those for you. I am very excited to introduce our panel of experts today. So I'm going to let them all introduce themselves because I'm sure I would not be able to do justice for the great things that they've done. So we're going to actually start with Susan. We're going to let Dr. Herbert actually start with the introductions.
Thank you, Mel. My name is Susan Hebert, and I'm actually not quite a doctor, maybe someday. I am a third-year PhD student, so I'm working towards that goal, but someday I'll get there. We are at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, the team I have with you today, and we really have started developing this curriculum way before COVID hit, but we're real excited about that. I myself am a former nurse, the leader from the simulation leadership program through the NLN, which was a really excellent experience, as well as I have a master's degree from Drexel in medical simulation and have been very honored to be able to lead the program as simulation at UT Knoxville here on Rocky Top, and we're very proud that we're also an accredited program, but it takes a team to make that happen. So I'm really excited to be able to share with you today.
All right, thank you, Susan. Soon to be doctor. So, all right, so our next panelist is Gail Griffith.
Hi, thank you, and welcome to everybody. I am the course coordinator for our Clinical Immersion 4 course, at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and that is our senior level adult med-surg course. We have separated our didactic away from our clinical experiences at UT. So mastery learning has been implemented very well with the separation of courses.
All right, thank you. Next, we will have Brooke Larkin, or Lakin, sorry. We'll have Brooke introduce herself.
It's okay, it's Lakin. Everybody messes it up. I'm Brooke Lakin, and I'm the course coordinator for the junior year for their clinical immersion 1 and 2, which is the beginning courses where they actually get to learn patient care and the foundation skills, and then a little bit more advanced skills in the second semester before they go to senior year. So we've enjoyed implementing, and it's been a great experience seeing them begin with no knowledge of anything and complete their mastery learning through the whole junior year to send them on to be successful in their senior learning. So thank you for having us.
Okay, thank you very much, Brooke. And Rachel, we'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Hodges and I'm the simulation coordinator here at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville in the College of Nursing. A little bit about me is that I am a UTK nursing alumni not super long ago, about 5 years ago. So it's been interesting to come back into a staff role in the college and see education from a different standpoint. But my role here is to really work with coordinators such as Gail and Brooke to set up their labs, to set up their simulation experiences, and to help them implement mastery learning into their courses.
All right. Thank you very much. Susan, we are going to turn it over to you.
Okay, before I move on, I was remiss to add an acknowledgement slide of who else has helped us implement this curriculum, because it's really taken a village to make it happen, not just several of us that are on the call today. So, you know, it really started with our undergraduate administrator coming to me it started about 2.5 years ago to say, what can we do to make our skills training better? And so I really want to acknowledge especially Dr. Sheila Swift, who is our lead here at UT, and the buy-in that she had from the beginning, because it's taken a lot of training and time to get us to where we're at. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Bill McGahee from Northwestern University School of Medicine. We were very fortunate to send a team of several faculty along with myself to that training, which is a week-long training, to train with them on how to do mastery learning the right way before we ever took on this big project that we've taken on. And then it's also taken a lot of buy-in from our undergraduate clinical faculty, our undergraduate students, and the rest of the sim team that's not on the call with you today, because it really, it's a great curriculum, but it takes all of those moving parts to make it happen. Okay, so let's go on. So what is mastery learning curriculum, and what is that all about? Okay, now, so when we first started looking into this, we really wanted to first, like I said, it was really prompted by our undergraduate administrator to come to say, you know, we're receiving feedback that we're doing good in a lot of areas. We're very fortunate to have a really high NCLEX pass rate. We have really bright students. Our undergraduate student average every year incoming GPA is usually averages about 4.2, and their ACT average is about 28. So we have really bright students. However, we were getting feedback that they weren't quite ready to practice. And when we looked at that, we were getting especially feedback from our clinical partners that we had weaknesses in our psychomotor skills. Basic stuff like IV start, central line dressing changes, those things that really matter along with safety measures when you're looking at clinical facilities. And we were having when we looked at those skills a little bit deeper, we were also having not only, not good feedback from our clinical partners, but we were also having declining clinical opportunities to do the skills that we really wanted to focus on in the actual clinical environment. Previously in our curriculum, all of our psychomotor skills were front-loaded to where we have a 2 years, it's a 4-year program, traditional program, and then we have an accelerated program. In our traditional program, the first 2 years, students take all prerequisite, and then they start their nursing courses fall semester of junior year. So it's 2 full years of nursing-only content. All of our psychomotor skills in foundationals to get them ready to go to clinicals used to live in our fall foundation course the first semester of junior year. That's where we had everything. We had everything from bed making to chest tubes. And we really, cognitively overloaded the students, no doubt. And we found that by, when we started doing a lot more simulation, we didn't really change where everything lived within the curriculum. We brought simulation into those labs, but we still were front loading everything. And we did some kind of sort of, I would call it, measurements of their skill in those courses. But when we really looked at how we were measuring and the rigor of what tools and those kind of things that we were using, we really weren't doing it well at all. So other than kind of sort of checking them off that first semester, we really had no assurance that our students were retaining the skills throughout the curriculum and then be ready to practice. So that was one of the reasons why we really needed to do something different. The students were also, we give them, part of being accredited is that we survey our students a lot. We get feedback from them a lot. They were always asking for additional skills practice, and we really didn't intentionally push back on that desire or request, but we really didn't have anywhere else to put it. And in our curriculum in the lab spaces that we were doing, because we're also a burgeoning population of undergraduate students, our chancellor has asked us to grow our numbers of students because we were sending away too many good students in Tennessee to go to other programs. And so our program has grown exponentially over the 7 years since I've been here. We used to have a traditional undergraduate cohort of about anywhere from like 50 to 70 students when I first came 7 years ago. And now our new junior class that Brooke is coordinating is around 160 students. So we've grown, we've more than doubled in 7 years. So we didn't really have a lot and we've also not changed our spaces a whole lot since then. So we don't have a lot of extra space to put students to do that. We also, as you can imagine, have a very large group of clinical faculty that live in both courses that Brooke coordinates along with the course that Gail coordinates. And because you have 10 to 12 clinical faculty that are underneath Brooke and Gail, we really had no way to assure that everything that the students were being delivered was standardized in any way. So they were getting a lot of mixed messages from clinical faculty according to what is the right way to do this skill. A lot of people were teaching to a facility and their policies and procedures on a skill instead of really teaching to the evidence-based practice of how to do that skill appropriately. So there was really no science behind a lot of what we were doing. So we wanted to make sure that we made that better as well. So the other thing was because we were cognitively overloading them and because the skills were not intentionally placed to match the curriculum in the other courses, because they have, they'll have several other courses along with these clinical courses each semester, there was really a failure for the students to understand the conceptual reasoning that lived within each skill. And they really didn't understand why doing this step after that step wasn't important, for instance, sterility, if they didn't understand why that was. So they had a failure really overall to master the essential skills for many of these reasons, along with we had an overabundance of skills in every class. There was a lot of opinions on what we needed to have in the curriculum, and so we just put everything there, everything that anybody could ever imagine as far as needing to do a skill in order to work in an acute care setting. We had multiple skills, and so we really weren't teaching anything to a good level of mastery. So this is kind of a little bit of an infographic about how we how we used to do our curriculum. So students would have videos and didactic assignments that they would have to do as kind of pre-sim assignments before they came to the labs. That when they got to the labs, the faculty were always teaching still, more in a C1 kind of do one manner. And then, like I said before, we really only check them off at the end of that junior year and never before. The other issue that we had with this manner of curriculum is because this, in this green area, the students knew that faculty were still going to teach everything and deliver all of the content and back to them, that they were relying on the faculty to pour all that information into them. So they really had no buy-in and to do these pre-sim assignments of the videos and didactic, because we really didn't do anything to assure that they did those assignments before they came to labs. So a lot of times we realized when the faculty would start teaching that they had not watched the lab videos, or they had not read the content that was assigned before they got to the lab, because we didn't hold them accountable for anything. So that we really kind of realized was an additional problem that came up with the old way. So these are some typical outcomes. According to how we taught before, we would still, so if you did a baseline and this was your baseline before teaching, and these are not real actual numbers, but this is just a good representation of what our numbers looked like before, we would get most of the students kind of sort of, like I said, above that level of mastery, but we really were still having a lot of slackers that kind of failed still at the end of the semester. But again, they were only for a grade. And so the students would get the grade, and because it was a final checkoff during finals week, we really had no time to remediate them at that time before they went into the next semester. And we really never followed up with them to see whether they ever did master that skill. So we had some slackers and we let them progress because we really never came back and evaluated them again. So that was also an issue that we identified. So let's go into talking a little bit more about now kind of, I'll give you an idea of how we went about intentionally developing and implementing this psychomotor mastery learning curriculum within our program. So the objective of doing all this was really to develop and implement a mastery learning and deliberate practice is also a piece of that curriculum to train and evaluate essential psychomotor skills throughout our undergraduate program. In order to do this, we needed, again, to secure feedback from our clinical partners, to identify the essential skills that we wanted to assure that the students were not being able to secure in their clinical experiences. Those really ones that were the exemplars. And then we needed to go back and align this mastery learning curriculum or the placement of the skills in a scaffolded way to meet the overall program and our clinical course objectives. So when we did this, again, we engaged our clinical partners in an intentional way, and our administrators took that feedback in discussions. It wasn't the undergraduate faculty that went and did that, because we decided, because our administrators and undergraduate already had good working relationships with those community partners, we let them go out and do the discussions. And we kind of looked at it more in a qualitative way of what were the themes that they were telling us, that our students were not performing well when they got them, that they were not ready to practice in certain areas, and they were having to go back and teach again. So that is kind of how we started. Then we also engaged the undergraduate curriculum committee and the clinical faculty to look at that big list of skills that we used to have. And the undergraduate curriculum committee took almost a year to look at all of that and really intentionally identify out of what the different pieces were of the missing elements in those essential skills. What were the essential skills? Where were they best placed to match the concepts that were being taught within each skill? And then they started doing that curricular mapping of the psychomotor skills to match the concepts taught within those courses and throughout our program. And then after that, then we were ready to, and that kind of process is where we identified and right now we have 11 essential skills that we teach to mastery and we evaluate to mastery. And then we needed to engage the clinical experts within each clinical course to start developing the evaluation tools that are an essential piece of this deliberate practice and mastery learning curriculum. And we did that we held a lot of meeting. We started, by looking at the evidence, the scientific evidence first, and we drafted the checklist to kind of match the evidence. And then we engaged, and most of those courses have about 10 to 12 clinical faculty experts within those courses, and we engage them in a Delphi method to identify what were the essential steps of each skill that were develop the tools. And then after you develop the tools, then through this mastery learning process, you also need to engage your experts in order to set your minimum passing scores using Angoff calculations so that you can assure that we're not just guessing what are the passing scores. So say, for instance, if our checklist has 25 items on it, we weren't just going to guess to say, oh, you needed to get a 20 out of 25 in order to pass that skill. We did it in a very intentional way using these Angoff scoring calculations. And then in addition to using minimum passing scores, then also as evidenced by safety, there are certain bolded items within the checklist, and I'll show you an example of one here in a little bit, that are essential, that if you fail that one item, it's an automatic failure. So say if we're doing a medication calculation, and if you calculate if it's a medication administration evaluation and you miscalculate the dose, then that's an automatic failure. Okay, so this is an example of how our essential skills are kind of identified and scaffolded. And as Brooke and Gail shared with you, they are the coordinators for 3 out of 4 of these classes that are on this slide. So the first semester, this is first semester junior year, is a course 313 that we're living in right now, and that's Brooke's coordinated course. And then this second semester is a clinical immersion 2 that occurs every spring, and that is where these other scaffolded skills live. And then Gail coordinates the immersion 4, and there's 4 additional skills there. So as you can see, now you're finding out what the 11 essential skills are that we identified. So in the first semester, the concepts that we teach are really mostly about safety. And so we, and these may seem simple, but if they don't do these things and learn these things to an appropriate level, they'll probably forever and ever do them inappropriately when they get out in the clinical setting. So we really, even though they seem simple, we wanted to make sure that they were doing them appropriately and safely. So we start with hand washing, and then we also have PPE, donning and doffing, and patient transfer in that first semester. And then the other non-essential skills that are in there are a lot of things, that are other kind of body mechanics, hygiene, wound care, some other kind of other things in there. But these are the ones that we chose that semester that we wanted to teach to mastery or evaluate to mastery. And then coming into second semester, they have, now we're starting in medication administration. So the concepts are safe medication administration and sterility are the two additional new concepts that have been added in addition to safety. And these other skills also sometimes carry over and are included within the checklists of the other skills. So of course, IM injection, you start off and you do hand washing. So you have to do hand washing appropriately or you won't get that item correct. So in that one, we have IM injection, sub-Q injection, and then the sterility is indwelling urinary catheter insertion. So that's the concepts that that's the skills that kind of bring in those concepts. In the third semester of their undergraduate curriculum, they take Immersion 4, and that is where we now still carried over the safe medication administration, including IV access. And so the two skills that we've not done up to this point that we needed to bring on our peripheral IV access and IV push. And then we also added the sterility of skills, including central line dressing change and tracheostomy suction. And again, these are ones that were mostly identified from our clinical partners. And then Immersion 4, and this is second semester of their senior year, we're still kind of, making sure they're carrying over and maintaining all of these other ones to mastery. And then at the end of the semester, right before they graduate in their clinical immersion course, which is very similar to like a preceptorship course, they still have several simulation days that are not only scenario days, but also skills days. And we then evaluate them again to make sure that they are able to master all these skills before they, right before graduation, right before they get hired. Okay. So what are the beliefs that we really want to reinforce when we started delivering this curriculum to our faculty and to our students? And so we take on the Center for Medical Simulation that all students are intelligent, capable, does their best, and wants to improve. And then we also want to make sure that all of our faculty are committed to student engagement and success. The point of doing all this is not to fail our students, but it's to catch our students before they fail. So what we really want to do is in these mastery learning or in the deliberate practice sessions, the faculty are committed to making sure that we're going to have everybody meet mastery on these skills before the end of the semester. And so we really intentionally look at each student, even though we have large cohorts, as individual learners. And I'll kind of explain to you in a little bit how that happens in this curriculum. So the process to prepare for the mastery curriculum, again, we did the curricular mapping between clinical and non-clinical courses. We developed those measurement tools, and then not only did we develop the tools using the Delphi technique and setting the minimum passing scores, as I explained just a little bit ago, but we also piloted them and we continued to revise them as necessary. And actually we've had a couple since we implemented them. Because of evidence-based science, we had to change them to meet the evidence. And so we also have to revise them as needed in that way too. We also do very intentional and sometimes they go over longer because we take a lot of time in discussing these checklists, and we do iterator trainings and calibrations on our all of the people that will be checking off in the class. We actually just held one a couple days ago with Gail's clinical faculty in her class, and how we do that is we made mediocre performance videos, not good performance and not really bad performance, because those tends to be the ones that are the easiest to score. It's really easy to score somebody that does everything absolutely perfectly, and it's really easy to score somebody that does the items all wrong. However, it's those ones that are kind of in the middle of the evaluation measures that are the most difficult. So we made those videos, and then that's how we do the inter-rater trainings, is we all score together, and then we have a very intentional discussion on how everybody scored, and we make calibrations to make sure that we're all on the same page about the scoring items before we go into their final evaluations at the end of the semester. We had to make a lot of changes, as you can imagine, within our simulation lab schedules to accommodate everything that we needed to do. Part of this curriculum is that those first labs, and I'll show you here in a little bit, we do baseline measurements before we ever do any instruction or deliberate practice with our students. So now the first thing they do in the lab, when they come to the lab where those mastery learning skills live, are, we still give them the pre-sim learning assignments. So we give them videos to watch, which we have made to match our checklist. We don't use any purchased videos at all for this part of the curriculum. And then, so they watch those videos, and they also have some didactic, readings to do along the concepts. And then the first thing we do when they come in the labs is that we do baseline measurements on every one of these skills. And no doubt, sometimes they're uncomfortable for the students and the faculty, because sometimes they're not always good. However, they're very essential to guide your deliberate practice when you have them in the labs. And it also helps us inform our curricular needs. And I'll give you an example of how that happens. So say in Gail's class, and if we've got them first semester of senior year, if we did baseline assessments on all of our senior students on their first medication administration in Gail's class, which was IV push, and we found that all of these students, overall, that cohort did not know how to calculate medications, then we know that we need to go back and look at our junior curriculum and say they did not learn, or they did not retain appropriately how to do medication calculations. And actually this year was the first time that we've ever had the full curriculum in the junior year and the full curriculum in the senior year. And we kind of had a really nice collateral effect by our baseline measurements for the Gale senior cohort this year on their IV push was way higher than it ever than it was last year when we implemented it in the senior year, because they had all those 2 mastery learning skills in Brooke's class already. So they came in at our very, they knew a lot more than our seniors did last year already about medication administration, because we aligned them intentionally to do all of those first, second, third safety checks, along with doing their 6 medication rights. And we found that that really was a wonderful collateral effect. Plus, word on the street from our students are that don't show up to lab unprepared, because you don't want to be the student that gets a 3 out of 25 on your first baseline checklist, because that shows us that you really didn't watch the video and that you really didn't look at the curriculum before you did that. So it's really bringing the students in at a higher level and holding them more accountable than we ever did before. And it's actually making the labs way easier for the faculty to teach, because that they're doing the practice only on the areas that the students need remediation and feedback on. And then again, we also had to prepare for scheduling in the additional mastery learning checkoffs that happened at the end of the semester. But because those clinical courses are standalone courses, they are counted as a portion of their final grade. So this is kind of a little bit of a infographic on how this curriculum actually works when you start playing it out. So this top box here, students, again, like I said, do the pre-sim learning, videos and didactic. We bring them into their scheduled labs. We do a baseline pretest. These two things, the baseline pretest and the deliberate practice, live within the first lab. So the faculty take those, we make copies of the checklist really fast, and we give them back to the students so that they have them to practice with then with their faculty, and look at what items they missed and what concepts they maybe don't understand within those skills. And then we, I don't have it revealed on this slide, but then we also have at least one, if not two, additional deliberate practice labs, depending on the course, that they are either mandatory peer-to-peer practice labs or an additional practice lab with their faculty that sometimes we let them check off early if they're ready. And so it's very learner driven on when they're ready to check off. So these mastery learning post-tests occur either during their open lab, one of their open labs, or during finals week. So say in Gail's course right now, there are 4 deliberate practice skills. If we're about ready to have our deliberate practice lab number 2 in that course next week, they can choose if they want to check off on up to 3 of those skills. So if they don't want to do it, they don't have to. They can wait till their mastery learning check off at the end of the semester. But if they want to go ahead and get a couple out of the way, if they're ready and confident that they're prepared to check off, they can do that. If the standards are not met, if they don't meet mastery, then we again, faculty go back with them according to their evaluation scores, do the deliberate practice, and we do it again until every student meets mastery before they get out of that semester. So no more sending students forward without passing or assuring that they've met the mastery. These are actually a little bit of an infographic, and I'm not going to go through this to a high degree because I really want to be able to have a nice discussion with everybody afterwards, but you'll get the PDF of the slides. And so this is how we have scaffolded everything and how we coordinate all of those labs within each of these clinical courses. The deliberate practice, what that looks like a little bit more in detail is that this is actually something that came directly from Northwestern. So the students are motivated, engaged learners. By delivering their evidence-based content using standardized instructions at an appropriate level of difficulty. And that's really essential here because, like I said before, we used to front load everything. Now we only give them what they're ready to complete, followed by their focused deliberate practice, which is guided by the evaluation of the baseline, using those rigorous, precise tools that we made with all of our clinical experts. And then they're getting their informative feedback. So the feedback that they received is intended to promote concept knowledge of the skills. So yes, we do have checklists, but no, our students are not just memorizing the checklist in order to perform the skill. They know exactly what lives within each one of these skills as far as the concepts. And then we continue with that deliberate practice until they meet psychomotor mastery. And they're hopefully then ready to practice safely. Our first cohort just graduated last year, and that was really not a full cohort. So we have not gone back yet and evaluated or gotten feedback from our clinical partners that gave us that feedback initially to see if it's made a difference. But that is something that hopefully we'll be able to do next summer when this new full cohort that's had every semester of this curriculum ready. Because when we did it last year, we really just piloted it in the fall semester. We started it in the Immersion 4 course because that's the quickest we could get it done after going to the Northwestern training. And then we started, so this is the full cohort that will be graduating soon. This is what one of our tools look like. Good practice in making a measurement tool is that you really want to keep it as close to 25 items or less as you can. Now, we do have some that have gone over that a little bit. Like I said, we have those 11 essential skills. This is an example of our peripheral IV start. And as you can see, this one has a minimum passing score of 19 out of 21, and it does have multiple bolded items on here. So if use this checklist, if they did not get a 19 out of 21, first of all, then that would be a failure. And if they missed any of these bolded items, if those were the ones they missed, then that would be an automatic failure, and they would have to go back to deliberate practice and redo it again. All the tools, and I think I've mentioned this before, are based on science. So we've gone back to the evidence of the skills and looked at them. We, again, engage our faculty members. We pilot test them often. And after those students get those baseline evaluations, they then now can have this checklist to kind of continue with that. How we have, when we, like everybody else, had to toggle off campus in the middle of spring break last year in March. These checklists were essential for us to continue the rest of the semester, especially with our seniors that were about ready to graduate, because what we did was they now had the checklist. We made up kits to send them home supplies to practice all of these checklists or practice all of these skills at home in their own environment. And then we actually, if I had more time, I would show you a video of one of our checklists that we did. Then we actually had, with two either people that had gone through the inter-rater training, we had two people come on virtually with them to do their base or their mastery evaluations. And we did that all virtually. So it was really nice. And it was a way for us to toggle off easily to do that in a virtual environment. We do have our students back in lab with us now, so we're back doing this face-to-face, but we did it in the spring, and we did a whole cohort over the summertime of ABSN students that we did this curriculum all virtual as well. So like I said, this is actual picture of one of the checklists or one of the evaluations in that we did at home. So as you can see, this is a very rudimentary task trainer for an IV push and IV start. We really, you know, the intention of doing this is not that they can get a vein successfully. It's really more about them doing the techniques in not breaking sterility. And this one actually was one of our IV push medication ones. And I think this one's kind of cute because, as you can see, look at this teddy bear in the background. So most of the time the students were setting it up a lot of times like on their dressers at home, and we would just kind of have them kind of reach out to us to make sure that we could see a good screen of what they were going to show us when we did this. All righty. This is an example of hopefully what our outcomes are. We do have actual data that we've done this, but we've not had, as you can imagine, with COVID, we've all been very busy, and our intention is we want to get all this, our real data published, but we've not had a chance to do that. So this is an example of what our outcomes used to be compared to now. We're assuring that we're getting them all to mastery and making those mastery accomplishments before we send them on. So now, Melody, would you like to share with us some of the questions that we had? And then I'm gonna hop off the speaker seat here, and hopefully Brooke and Gail and Rachel can help me answer some of the questions that we might have, or anything that anybody wants to discuss. We'd love to discuss this curriculum with you.
All right, well, thank you, Susan, very much for all that great information. We do have some great questions coming in. We're going to kind of theme them as best we can. I'm actually going to start with theming some questions related to faculty and faculty load. So a couple of questions related to how do you load faculty? It seems like a very intense process. Did you have to hire more staff? And what is the student to faculty ratio in your labs?
I can go ahead and start with that. That's a great question because faculty workload, especially in the days of COVID, have been very, very heavy. Fortunately and unfortunately, because of COVID, we've had to decrease the amount of students that we are having in our labs. So that has actually increased our faculty to student ratio And one of the things that has really helped us this semester is both Brooke and I have really advocated for faculty to self-schedule themselves in labs. And believe it or not, that self-scheduling has definitely helped faculty work through their daily schedule. And we are really having decreased amount of faculty, or an increased amount of faculty buy-in because of that. So it has really helped us both as a positive and a negative, I guess.
So what is your faculty ratio? Because that question has actually been asked several times. So what is your student to faculty ratio? Maybe pre-COVID, COVID?
Yeah, in all our labs, it's 1 to 8.
Okay.
So 1 faculty to 8 students, just like our clinical rotations are. So that whatever we do in the clinical, in simulation, always matches the faculty ratio of our clinicals.
Okay. And then the other burning question that's come up a few times is, did you have to hire more staff, or were you able to work with the staff that you had before?
So like I said, the sim team has a huge responsibility in all of this, but I'm gonna let Rachel actually explain some of what the sim team does that helps this curriculum. So it's not all on faculty. It's a lot that we've taken on with the sim team as well.
I thought she was going to pass that off, and if she didn't, I was going to answer it anyway. So from the staff standpoint, the answer is yes and no. So when we first initially started Mastery Learning, we did not receive additional staff to help with implementation of Mastery Learning curriculum. However, because of COVID and because of the changes at the college, this academic year, we have had more staff that have been added. So it's not happened because of Mastery Learning alone, but it's also happened in addition to Mastery Learning and COVID. But one of the ways that we were able to help course coordinators like Brooke and Gail with Mastery Learning evaluations is that myself, Susan, and 1 or 2 other sim staff who are RNs do help with evaluations. That's typically on a as needed basis if there's not enough faculty to cover all of the checkoffs that we have to do. But yes, we can evaluate the skill and give feedback to students, because not only are we RNs that have seen the skill itself, myself and 2 other sim staff who are currently working also graduated from this college and from this institution. So they're familiar with the skill and with the curriculum. So we've thrown staff in as we have the ability to, but sometimes we just don't, and we're pulled away. So it's case by case and day by day basis, honestly.
All right, thank you. Marianne, I'll let you ask the next set of questions.
Okay, well, there are some questions around how many times students can test and to achieve their mastery, and does if they need additional remediation, does it affect their grade?
I can answer
that.
Oh, okay, go on, Brooke. Go, Brooke.
Okay. So the question was, how many times can they remediate and retry the skill? Is that correct, Marianne?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the students can practice the skill as much as they want. They can practice it in the scheduled labs where we actually go over the skills, and they can come to deliberate practice and go over it as much as they want. When they are ready to say they're ready to check off for mastery, that's the grade that goes in the grade book. But if they don't master the skill, if they miss a bold point or they don't meet the minimum pass score, then they can continue to practice, but they will have to check off by the end of the semester. And we never had a student not be able to successfully move on so far.
Do you have a policy, though, about that if it should occur in the future?
So we don't quite have a policy yet because it's not really been an issue yet. So we have had, so when we went toggled a little bit offline. We have had a couple students that have had to retest. So they do their baseline test, they do their final mastery. We typically have had about maybe 10% that need to retest. But like Brooke said, that final mastery is the grade that is entered. And then we commit to the 10% to, we bring, we still bring them back in. We do a little bit of deliberate practice with them, either on an individual basis, depending on the level of competence that they've missed, or in a group setting with other students. And then we retest them, but we've really only had them have that about 10% retest twice. So and I think the key there is because they know the first one is for grade, they really take a lot of time and effort on the practice. So it forces them to intentionally practice. And so they do a lot of time on their own practicing, even without skills and stuff at home. They do a lot of visualization of practice as well. We've also done some other kind of exercises that we didn't explain in here that we help their deliberate practice. So sometimes we'll have them, even though we teach the concepts in deliberate practice within the labs, we have done exercises that we have them cut apart the pieces and scramble them up to the checklist and see if they can, start by practicing that way. So we've tried to teach them several different ways to also train that makes it a better process. So we probably need to have a policy in case that ever happens, because no doubt it probably will. But it is a policy that they can't progress until they meet mastery. So they're engaged.
Okay. Mel, you want to take the next?
Yes, I can take the next one. So there's a few questions related to the actual skills themselves, or how you implemented those mastery learning skills. So there were a couple questions related to physical assessment and why physical assessment wasn't a mastery level skill. And then so I'll let you answer that one, then I'll ask the next question related to skills.
So that's a great question. I'll take that one because the others may not know. We have actually started it at it's not as level, the time and intensity it would take to do physical assessment in the mastery learning modality would be really a big challenge to take. So it's not that we haven't thought about that, we have. Our physical assessment faculty has actually started she has little mini checklists for each system. And then of course we do a head to toe checklist, or head to toe fit assessment evaluation at the end of that course. The reason why we don't call that a mastery learning deliberate practice is because the essential component of that is those baseline assessments. And we just don't have the faculty and the time and effort to do the baseline assessment for each system, and then also a head to toe, and then integrate that into that course. So that's why that's not been, it's not because we don't want to, it's just we don't have the resources to make that happen.
Thank you. There was a question about what items do you send home with students in their skills kits? So what did they have access to at home?
I'll answer that. They had, so we'll take example of the IV push, because I know that was one of the checklists that we covered. So it was essentially whatever items was listed on the checklist that they would need. So one of the items is typically gather your needed supplies. So for IV pushes, we had to send them a simulated medication vial, simulated normal saline flushes, gloves, alcohol swabs, and they would be sent home with a makeshift task trainer that had extension tubing taped to it so that students could give the IV push medication. So it depends on the skill. A lot of times we were making makeshift trainers, and we've even done that going into the fall semester because of COVID. So for example, one of the trach suctions was the box of a Foley kit that we put a hole in and put a breakthrough. Or a central line, we would send home one of our simulated central lines that we use with mannequins, and students would tape it to a table or tape it to a textbook or tape it to a piece of cardboard, whatever it is, or they could tape it to their roommate or whoever was with them. So we sent home the actual items that you would need for the specific skill. If it included needles, they had to return those to the College of Nursing in biohazard containers.
Yeah, so we did it really intentionally. So they had to sign out the skills, and then we also kept track of when the skills were turned in and what items were within those to make sure that we didn't have anything missing. We also made we had a contract, or not a contract that they had to sign to say that they would not use those items inappropriately, and we made sure that especially the medications, we explained to them, these are simulated medications. They would harm a person if you use them on a live person. So we had all that in there, and then we had them sign that contract, and we had everything with simulation labels on it as well.
All right, thank you very much. And Marianne, it looks like you get the last set of questions.
Okay. Well, could you clarify how these deliberate practice mastery learning skill labs are integrated in? Is it part of a course? Is it a separate course? Is it integrated? And if it is integrated, which I think it may be, did you have to increase the number of credits in that course?
I can answer that. That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. We separated, when we revised our curriculum, we separated our didactic from our skills. So when Brooke and I are talking about, we're teaching in a clinical immersion course that is strictly dealing with skills. So it deals with our deliberate practices, our simulations, our clinical hours are in there, as well as we also have active service learning hours that are in this course. So we do 180 hours of actual clinical time that includes all those different varieties. So deliberate practice is incorporated into the hours of this course.
Okay, so then it just runs concurrently with the other content in your curriculum that would be appropriate for those skills.
Correct.
Yeah. The other thing that I failed to mention in the presentation, it's on that one slide that I went through really quickly, is that within those clinical immersion courses, there are also scenario days that integrate the skills within the scenarios. So not only are we teaching them, this in the skill, so we have skills labs, and then we have scenario days, and the same skills that live within that semester are also integrated into at least 2 to 3 scenarios. So say they'll have a scenario where they have to do the IV push within the scenario that's included in the semester where Gail's stuff lives, or Brooks will have, sub-Q injection, we'll have Foley insertion, we'll have those kind of things within her course, the scenario days within that course. So they are getting clinical time, as most people are in simulation, but it's really kind of done that way. And no, we did not increase the hours for those courses, because we already taught the skills within those courses. We're just now doing it in a more intentional way.
Okay. Well, I think we are ready to close. We're just about on the hour, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and be sure to join us for our next Taking Aim at Good Teaching that will occur next month, and we'll focus on our affective domain objectives. So hope to see you there. Any closing housekeeping details, Andrea?
Just to let everyone know that I did put the registration link for the next webinar in the chat box, so feel free to access that. And I will have the recording up on the NLN Coronavirus Resource Center page no later than next Tuesday. So thank you all again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend.